Pathetic trophy husband who is good for nothing. Those words were printed in elegant letters on my place card at the head table in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. All around me, Whitmore Corporation executives burst into laughter as I held the card as if it were evidence of a crime. "My God, Jennifer, did you really do this?" said a blonde woman, clapping her hands together with laughter. "That's the best place card I've ever seen at a corporate gala." My wife Laura stood beside me, but not next to me. Her eyes sparkled with amusement as she watched my public humiliation unfold as premium entertainment for 300 pharmaceutical executives. "It was Jennifer's idea," Laura replied, adjusting her $2,000 black dress. "She said she wanted to make the evening memorable for everyone." Jennifer Walsh, the CEO of Whitmore Corporation and Laura's boss for the past 2 years, approached with a glass of champagne in her hand and that predatory smile I had grown to hate. "Dan, I hope you're not taking this personally," she said, her voice carrying the false sweetness of someone who had just buried a knife in your back. "It's just a little joke to break the ice. You understand, don't you? My name is Dan Thompson, and at 34, I just found out that my wife of 8 years considers our relationship a joke worthy of corporate entertainment." What none of these people knew was that the pathetic trophy husband had spent the last 10 years building one of the most respected financial consulting firms specializing in pharmaceutical industry auditing. While Laura was building her career as marketing director at Whitmore, I was behind the scenes analyzing balance sheets, detecting accounting irregularities, and helping investors avoid companies with questionable practices. The irony was delicious. I probably knew more about the financial operations of Whitmore Corporation than anyone in that room, including Jennifer herself. "Sure," I replied calmly, folding the card and placing it in the inside pocket of my tuxedo. "Very creative." Jennifer smiled more broadly, interpreting my calmness as submission. Laura waved to some colleagues and walked away, leaving me alone in the middle of the gilded hall, surrounded by people who saw me as an irrelevant accessory in my wife's professional life. During dinner, I sat at the table designated for spouses, while Laura took her place at the main table next to Jennifer. I watched from afar as they whispered and laughed, probably commenting on how perfect the prank had been. What they didn't realize was that I spent the entire evening memorizing faces, names, and conversations. Every executive who laughed at my humiliation, every sarcastic comment about useless husbands, every joke about men who live off their successful wives. If you're enjoying this tale of twist and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how this seemingly devastating night would become the catalyst for a revenge no one would ever forget. When the gala ended and we drove home in silence in our Tesla, Laura finally broke the silence. "Aren't you going to say anything about the card?" "What would you like me to say?" "I don't know. That it was funny. That you got the joke." I pulled into the driveway of our Westchester home and turned off the engine. "It was very enlightening," I replied. Laura frowned. "Enlightening how?" But I was already getting out of the car, leaving the question unanswered. Because while she and Jennifer celebrated their little social victory, I was already mentally calculating the next steps in a plan that would turn their little joke into the biggest professional nightmare they had ever faced. After all, they had just awakened the attention of the only man in that room capable of completely dismantling the company they were so proud of. The Monday after the gala, Laura left for work without saying a word. No good morning, no bye, just the sound of the garage door closing at 7:15 a.m., as usual. I sat in our Carrara marble kitchen, drinking coffee and mentally reviewing every detail of the previous night. I wasn't processing the humiliation, I was cataloging information. Jennifer Walsh hadn't just appeared out of nowhere in Laura's life. 2 years ago, when she was promoted to CEO of Whitmore Corporation at the age of 38, Laura came home beaming with admiration. "Dan, you have to meet my new boss," she said that night, tossing her Prada bag on the living room couch. "Jennifer Walsh is a phenomenon. She took over Whitmore when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy and turned it around in 18 months. I had researched Jennifer that same night. Harvard graduate, MBA from Wharton, impressive track record at 3 major pharmaceutical corporations. On paper, she was truly impressive. What I couldn't have predicted was how she would transform my wife into a completely different person. The change was gradual, almost imperceptible. First, Laura started coming home late from work. "Jennifer has these brainstorming sessions that go on," she explained. "She says the best ideas come when you're not limited by business hours." Then came the trips. Pharmaceutical conventions in Chicago, marketing conferences in Los Angeles, strategy meetings in Miami. Laura had always traveled for work, but now it was different. She came home talking exclusively about Jennifer. Jennifer said I have the potential to be VP of Global Marketing, Laura commented during dinner 3 months after Jennifer's promotion. She wants to include me in more strategic projects. That's great, I replied, cutting my salmon. What kind of projects? Confidential stuff. Jennifer is very careful with sensitive information. She says trust is something you build slowly. That's when I started to see the pattern. Jennifer was isolating Laura, creating an exclusive inner circle where only a few privileged people had access to sensitive information. The changes became more obvious in the months that followed. Laura started wearing more expensive suits, always commenting on the dress code Jennifer had implemented. Image is part of corporate strategy, she explained, showing off a $700 blouse. Our weekends, which had once been sacred, began to be invaded by work emergencies. Jennifer would call on Saturday mornings, and Laura would disappear for hours on urgent conference calls. Jennifer doesn't call just to call, Laura would say when I complained. She values her time. If she's calling me on the weekend, it's because she trusts my opinion on something important. The turning point came 6 months ago during a dinner at my parents' house. My father, a retired accountant, made a casual comment about irregularities he had read about in the newspapers concerning pharmaceutical companies. Those big corporations always find creative ways to cook the books, he said, spreading butter on his bread. Dan must see this stuff all the time at his job. Laura laughed in a way I had never heard before. It was a cold, almost dismissive sound. Dan's father doesn't understand the complexities of modern industry, she said, looking directly at me. Jennifer always says that outsiders make judgments based on sensational headlines. My father stopped chewing. My mother put down her fork. In 20 years together, Laura had never disrespected my parents. I'm sorry, honey, my father replied with the patience of someone who had seen a lot in his life. I didn't mean to sound simplistic. It's just that in 40 years of accounting, I've learned to recognize a few signs. Sure, Laura said, but her tone suggested otherwise. It's just that Jennifer has a broader perspective on these issues. That night, after my parents left, I tried to talk to Laura about what had happened. Did you realize how rude you were to my father? I wasn't rude. I just clarified that he doesn't have all the information. He's been an accountant for 40 years, Laura. He knows what he's talking about. And Jennifer is the CEO of a $2 billion corporation. She knows what she's talking about, too. It was the first time I felt like I was talking to a stranger. The following months were a slow erosion of everything we had built together. Laura stopped asking me about my work. When I tried to share interesting findings from my consulting projects, she would respond with "that's nice" without looking up from her phone. Jennifer had become the only source of professional validation in Laura's life. Any opinion that didn't come from her was automatically dismissed. The cruelest irony was that, during this entire time, I was developing the most comprehensive report of my career on irregularities in the pharmaceutical industry. 3 companies had already hired me to investigate questionable practices by competitors. Whitmore Corporation was one of the companies that consistently appeared in my research. Not because clients had requested it, but because its numbers simply didn't add up. Laura didn't know that while she was absorbing Jennifer's wisdom on corporate ethics, I was documenting evidence that her mentor was manipulating quarterly reports to artificially inflate the stock price. The morning after the gala, sitting alone in our kitchen, I opened my laptop and reviewed the files I had collected on Whitmore over the past 2 years. Overstated revenues, research costs shifted between quarters, and most interestingly, a pattern of insider trading that appeared to be coordinated with Jennifer's schedule. My wife had spent 2 years being manipulated by a corporate criminal, and I had all the evidence I needed to prove it. But while Jennifer thought she had publicly humiliated me, turning me into a joke in front of 300 executives, she didn't know she had just awakened the attention of the one man in that room with the knowledge, the connections, and the motivation to completely dismantle the fraudulent empire she had built. The card she had prepared called me a pathetic trophy husband. By the end of the week, she would discover the true meaning of the word pathetic. 3 days after the gala, Laura came home with a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne and a smile I hadn't seen in months. Jennifer promoted me to Vice President of Global Marketing, she announced, placing the bottle on the kitchen counter as if it were a trophy. Base salary of $250,000, plus performance bonuses. I was preparing dinner, something that had become my responsibility since Laura's work emergencies became more frequent. Congratulations, I replied, chopping onions without looking at her. That's a significant promotion. Dan, you don't understand. Laura moved closer, her eyes shining with an excitement that seemed forced. Jennifer said I have the potential to be CEO of a subsidiary. That she sees leadership in me that other people don't. The irony was almost painful. Jennifer had spent 2 years teaching Laura not to see leadership in the person closest to her, her own husband. And what does that mean for us? I asked, finally turning to face her. It means longer trips. Maybe a few months abroad, setting up operations in Europe. Jennifer wants me to lead the international expansion. Laura spoke as if she were reading from a script prepared by Jennifer. Every word sounded rehearsed, every justification perfectly aligned with what I imagined her mentor had planted in her mind. Months abroad, I repeated slowly. Jennifer says sacrifices are necessary when you're building something important. That mediocre people never understand the price of real success. Mediocre people. The words came out of Laura's mouth as if they were her own, but I recognized Jennifer's venom immediately. And I fall into the category of mediocre people? Laura hesitated for a second. A flash of awareness crossed her face before it was quickly suppressed. It's not about you, Dan. It's about my career. Jennifer says that when you have an opportunity like this, you have to be completely focused. No distractions. Distractions. 8 years of marriage, reduced to distractions. That night, Laura went to bed early, claiming she had a video conference with the European team at 5 in the morning. I stayed in my office until 2 in the morning, not working on client projects, but digging into the deepest layers of Whitmore Corporation's financial records. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Jennifer wasn't just manipulating quarterly numbers. She was orchestrating a scheme to artificially inflate drug prices, using shell subsidiaries to justify non-existent costs and funneling profits to tax havens through a complex network of front companies. But the most devastating discovery was that Laura was, unbeknownst to her, directly involved in the scheme. The marketing campaigns she had developed over the past 18 months weren't just advertising. They were part of a coordinated strategy to create artificial demand for drugs whose prices had been inflated by as much as 400%. Diabetic patients were paying 8 times more for insulin because of marketing innovations Laura had created. Families were choosing between essential medicines and other basic necessities because Laura's strategies made the products seem more valuable than they really were. My wife had unwittingly become the public face of a scheme that was literally killing people for greed. On Thursday, I got a call from Marcus Rivera, an investigative reporter at the Washington Post with whom I had worked 2 years earlier on an exposé of fraud in the medical device industry. Dan, I need to talk to you in person, he said, his voice carrying that urgency journalists develop when they smell a big story. We've received an anonymous tip about wrongdoing at Whitmore Corporation. Your name came up as one of the few independent consultants with enough expertise to validate the information. I met Marcus at a small cafe in downtown Manhattan on Friday afternoon. He was sitting at a table in the back, a manila folder in front of him and the look of someone who had discovered something big. What do you know about Jennifer Walsh? Was his first question after we ordered coffee. Professionally or personally? Both. I spent the next hour explaining everything I had discovered about Whitmore's accounting practices, without mentioning my personal connection to Laura. Marcus took detailed notes, asking specific questions that showed he already had substantial information. Dan, we have internal documents that suggest Jennifer Walsh is using Whitmore as a money laundering operation for international pharmaceutical cartels, he said, opening the folder. But we need someone with your expertise to interpret the financial data in a way that the public will understand. The documents Marcus showed me were explosive. Bank transfers to companies that didn't exist, inflated research contracts with phantom laboratories, and most shocking of all, evidence that Jennifer was deliberately delaying the release of generic drugs to maximize profits on brand name products. How many people do you estimate have been harmed by these practices? Marcus asked. I did some quick mental calculations based on the data he had shared. Conservatively, about 200,000 American families have paid inflated prices for essential drugs in the last 2 years. Of those, approximately 15,000 may have had limited or denied access to treatment due to artificially high costs. Marcus stopped typing and looked directly at me. 15,000 people. At least. And Jennifer Walsh is profiting directly from this? Jennifer Walsh isn't just profiting. She's building a financial empire using human suffering as raw material. That night, I went home knowing I had reached the point of no return. Laura was in the living room, talking on the phone with Jennifer about strategies for European expansion. Her voice was excited, full of plans and ambitions that I now knew were built on a foundation of corporate crime. "Jennifer, you're right," I heard Laura say. "When you're building something truly important, you can't let yourself be limited by people who don't share your vision." People who don't share your vision. Once again, Jennifer's words coming out of my wife's mouth. But while Laura absorbed every toxic word from her mentor, I was in my office crafting a plan that would not only end Jennifer Walsh's career, but completely destroy the empire built on lies and manipulation. The woman who had called me a pathetic trophy husband, and turned my wife into a stranger, was about to discover the true meaning of the word devastation. The first move would be subtly destructive. The second, publicly humiliating. And the third? The third would ensure that Jennifer Walsh would never again be able to harm another family or manipulate another relationship. While Laura continued her phone conversation, full of servile gratitude to the woman who was destroying our life, I began typing the first email that would initiate the most spectacular fall the pharmaceutical industry had ever witnessed. Monday morning, 7 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. It was Marcus Rivera. "Dan, I need you to see this." His voice carried an urgency that made my coffee grow cold in my cup. "We've gained access to Whitmore's internal emails. What we've found is beyond anything we could have imagined." I met Marcus at the same coffee shop an hour later. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman in her 50s, with perfectly coiffed gray hair and eyes that had seen a lot, sat next to him. "Dan, this is Patricia Kowalski, former CFO of Whitmore Corporation," Marcus said, making the introductions. "She was fired 6 months ago after questioning some accounting practices." Patricia extended her hand firmly. "Mr. Thompson, I've read your reports on irregularities in the pharmaceutical industry. Your work is thorough and accurate." "Thank you." Marcus said, "You have information about Whitmore." "Information is an understatement," Patricia said, opening a thick folder. "I have evidence that Jennifer Walsh is operating the largest drug price manipulation scheme in history. And his wife," she hesitated, glancing at Marcus. "You can speak freely," I replied. "At this point, there's nothing personal about this investigation." Laura was specifically recruited by Jennifer to be the public face of campaigns justifying price increases. She doesn't know it, but every marketing strategy she develops is designed to normalize practices that should be criminal. Patricia showed me a series of documents that made my stomach turn. Internal reports showing that Whitmore could produce insulin for $17 a unit, but was selling it for $230. Cancer drugs with a production cost of $40 were being sold for $3,200. And Laura knows this. I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Jennifer only shares the information Laura needs to create compelling campaigns. Her wife genuinely believes she's promoting medical innovation. In reality, she's selling a slow death to those who can't afford to pay. I spent the next week immersed in the documentation Patricia had provided. I worked 16 hours a day, cross-checking data, verifying dates, building an irrefutable timeline of Whitmore's crimes. Laura barely noticed my absence. She was too busy preparing for her new position, making international calls late into the night and studying European markets. "Jennifer wants me to present our global strategy to the board on Friday," she mentioned on one of the rare occasions we had dinner together. "If all goes well," she said, "I could be based in London by the end of the year." "London," I repeated, mentally calculating how this would affect my schedule. "Jennifer says it's a unique opportunity. That women like me, who really understand the market, are rare." Women like her. More Jennifer language coming out of Laura's mouth. On Thursday, I received an unexpected call. The number wasn't in my phone book, but the voice was familiar. "Dan Thompson? This is Robert Chun from the Department of Justice. Antitrust Division." My blood ran cold. "How can I help you?" "We are investigating allegations of monopolistic practices in the pharmaceutical industry. Your name came up as someone with relevant expertise. Would you like to talk?" "Sure. When would be convenient?" How about now? I'm in your driveway. I looked out the window and saw a black sedan parked in front of our garage. Robert Chun was a middle-aged Asian man, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his expression revealing nothing. "Mr. Thompson, let's get right to the point," he said, sitting down in my living room. "We have information that you have documentation regarding irregularities at Whitmore Corporation. If you've been following this journey of shocking discoveries, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next developments in this investigation that is about to shake the entire pharmaceutical industry." "I can confirm that I have access to certain information," I replied carefully. "The Department of Justice is building a case that could result in federal criminal charges. We need witnesses with technical credibility." "What kind of charges?" "Conspiracy to commit securities fraud, price manipulation, violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and possibly racketeering under RICO statutes." Every crime he mentioned carried decades-long prison sentences. "And if I cooperate?" "Immunity from prosecution, witness protection if necessary, and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping dismantle an organization that has harmed thousands of American families." That night, Laura came home beaming with a bottle of French champagne that cost more than my first car. "Jennifer gave me full access to the European budgets," she announced, pouring 2 glasses without noticing that I wasn't drinking. "Dan, we're talking about marketing campaigns with $50 million budgets. This is going to completely transform my career." $50 million. Money that would come directly from the pockets of desperate families paying inflated prices for essential medications. "Congratulations," I managed to say. "Jennifer said something interesting today," Laura continued, her voice taking on that conspiratorial tone that had become familiar. "She said that people like us need to think big. That we can't let ourselves be limited by, how she put it, small minds and moral judgments from people who have never built anything important." Small minds. Moral judgments. Jennifer's words coming out of my wife's mouth like well-rehearsed poison. "And you agree with that?" I asked. "Of course I do. Jennifer's right. When you're building something revolutionary, there are always going to be people who don't understand the bigger picture. People who don't understand the bigger picture. Like diabetic families choosing between insulin and food. Like cancer patients dying because they can't afford artificially inflated treatments." On Friday morning, I signed my cooperation agreement with the Department of Justice. Robert Chun explained that the investigation was in its final stages, awaiting only the technical evidence I could provide. "Once you testify before the grand jury, there's no turning back," he warned me. "Jennifer Walsh will be indicted, probably within weeks. Anyone associated with the fraudulent practices will face consequences. Including my wife. That depends on her level of knowledge of the illegal activities. If she was just an unwitting tool, she'll probably get immunity in exchange for cooperation. But if we find out she knew..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. That afternoon, Laura left for her presentation to the Whitmore board. She was wearing her most expensive suit, carrying an Italian leather briefcase, and radiating the confidence of someone who believed she was at the top of her game. "Wish me luck," she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Jennifer said that if everything goes well today, my promotion could be announced next week." "Good luck," I replied, knowing it would be the last time she left the house as Whitmore Corporation's marketing director. As the Tesla disappeared from our driveway, I called Marcus Rivera. "It's time," I said simply. "Are you sure?" "Once we publish, there's no turning back." "I'm sure." "Okay." The story goes out in the Washington Post tomorrow morning. Pharmaceutical executive under federal investigation for billion-dollar price-fixing scheme. Front page. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of our empty house. In less than 24 hours, Jennifer Walsh's world would be completely shattered. And Laura. Laura would discover that the mentor she idolized was a criminal, and that the husband she despised was the man responsible for exposing the truth. The pathetic trophy husband was about to bring down an empire built on blood and greed. And there was no stopping what had already begun. Saturday, 5:45 a.m. My phone vibrated with a notification I had been waiting for. Pharmaceutical executive under federal investigation for billion-dollar price-fixing scheme. The Washington Post headline filled my phone screen. The photo of Jennifer Walsh, taken during a medical convention 6 months ago, was printed just below. She smiled with that arrogant confidence I had learned to hate. Laura was still sleeping next to me, completely unaware that her world was falling apart in real time. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen to make coffee, knowing that in a few minutes our phone would start ringing. The first call came at 6:13. It was Jennifer. "Laura, I need you to come to the office right now." Her voice was agitated, losing the controlled calm she always maintained. "We have a serious situation to deal with." I heard Laura moving around in her room, probably trying to process why her mentor was calling so early on a Saturday. "Jennifer? What's going on?" "Just come. And don't talk to anyone from the press." Press. The word that confirmed Jennifer already knew about the article. Laura came downstairs 15 minutes later, dressed casually but still elegantly, her hair tied back in a perfect ponytail even in her rush. "Jennifer needs me at the office," she said, grabbing her keys from the Tesla. "Some kind of corporate emergency." "Good luck," I replied, sipping my coffee and watching her worried expression. "Dan, have you read the news today?" "Not yet." "Why?" Jennifer seemed different. Nervous. "It's not like her." 40 minutes later, Laura called. Her voice was completely different. "Dan, I need you to pick me up at the Whitmore office. Now." "What happened?" "Just come. And, Dan, bring documents about our financial situation. Bank accounts, investments, everything." "Why would you need that?" "Just bring it." The drive to Whitmore's office took 25 minutes in light Saturday traffic. The whole way there, I imagined Laura discovering that her mentor was a criminal and that her despised husband was responsible for exposing the truth. I found Laura in the lobby of the corporate building, sitting in one of the leather armchairs with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was total confusion, as if someone had explained to her that gravity worked in reverse. "Jennifer's been arrested," she said as soon as she saw me. "Federal agents showed up here at 7 this morning with search and seizure warrants." "Arrested for what?" "Securities fraud, price manipulation, conspiracy." "Dan, the list has 12 different charges." I sat down next to her, keeping my expression carefully neutral. "This is serious." The company's lawyers said that any employee involved in marketing projects over the last 2 years could be called to testify. "Dan." She looked at me directly for the first time in months. "They mentioned that the investigations began with allegations from an independent financial consultant." An independent financial consultant. Someone with expertise in pharmaceutical audits who provided technical evidence to the Department of Justice. At that moment, I saw suspicion begin to form in her eyes. Laura had always been smart, just overshadowed by Jennifer's manipulation. Now, with her mentor out of the picture, her analytical mind was reconnecting dots she had ignored. "Dan, you work in pharmaceutical auditing. Among other things. You have technical knowledge of fraudulent accounting practices." "Yes." "And you never liked Jennifer." "No." Laura was silent for a long moment, processing information with the same intensity one had seen her use in corporate presentations. "You knew this, didn't you?" "Knew what?" "About Jennifer's illegal practices. The price manipulation. Everything." I took a deep breath. The moment of complete truth had arrived. "Laura, I've known for 2 years that Jennifer Walsh has been running fraudulent schemes at Whitmore Corporation. For 6 months, I've had enough evidence to completely destroy her career." The color drained from Laura's face. "And you never told me?" "I did. Dozens of times. Every time I mentioned irregularities in the pharmaceutical industry, every time I questioned the innovative practices Jennifer was implementing, every time I suggested caution about her projects. But you never said directly that. Laura, on a Tuesday in March last year, you came home talking about how Jennifer had found a creative strategy to justify a 400% increase in the price of insulin. I said verbatim that it sounded like market manipulation. You replied that I didn't understand the complexities of modern business. She was silent, probably remembering the conversation. On the Friday after Valentine's Day, you mentioned that Jennifer was shifting research costs between different divisions to optimize the quarterly reports. I explained that this was a form of accounting fraud. You said that Jennifer had an MBA from Wharton and knew what she was doing. Dan. During dinner with my parents, when my father commented on irregularities in the pharmaceutical industry, you silenced him in favor of Jennifer's broader perspective. He was right, Laura. He was right about everything. Tears began to well up in her eyes. At the gala, when Jennifer publicly humiliated me by calling me a pathetic trophy husband, you laughed along with all the other executives. At that moment, I decided it was time to stop trying to save you from a criminal mentor and start saving the families who were being hurt by her schemes. You were the source of the investigations? I was the person who provided the Department of Justice with enough technical documentation to indict her for federal crimes, yes. Laura covered her face with her hands. Dan, do you realize this could destroy me too? That I was involved in all the marketing projects that justified the inflated prices? I know. And you did it anyway? I was silent for a moment, choosing my words carefully. Laura, 3 weeks ago I received an email from a mother in Ohio whose 14-year-old diabetic son died because she couldn't afford the price of insulin that your marketing campaign helped inflate. She didn't know who to write to, so she wrote to me because my name appeared in articles about drug prices. Laura raised her head, her eyes red from crying. This mother told me she sold the family car, canceled their health insurance, took out loans from loan sharks, and still couldn't raise enough money for the full treatment. Do you know what she said at the end of the letter? What? She said she didn't understand how people could sleep at night knowing they were profiting from the suffering of children. And in that moment, Laura, I realized you had become one of those people. The silence stretched between us like an abyss. So you chose to destroy my career to save strangers? I chose to prevent more families from losing children to Jennifer Walsh's greed. If that meant you would face consequences for your participation in her schemes, then yes, that was my choice. Laura rose from the armchair and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot where federal agents were still removing boxes of documents from Whitmore's offices. What happens to me now? That depends on how much you really knew about the illegal practices and whether you're willing to cooperate with the authorities. What about us? Our marriage. I thought about the question for a long moment. Laura, on the night of the gala, when you laughed at my public humiliation, our marriage ended. You just didn't know it yet. She turned to face me. What about the woman who fell in love with an ambitious student in the university library? The partner who promised to support my professional dreams? The wife I loved for 8 years. That woman was replaced by someone who considered corporate genocide an innovative marketing strategy. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. Dan, I didn't know that. You didn't know because you chose not to know. Every time I tried to warn you, you silenced me in favor of Jennifer's version. You turned ignorance into a conscious decision. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Robert Chun. Dan, we need to talk. Jennifer Walsh is trying to negotiate a plea deal. She's claiming that your wife was just an employee following orders. I looked at Laura, who was watching me with a mixture of hope and terror. I'm listening. If Laura cooperates fully, providing details about internal practices and decision-making processes, we can offer her full immunity. And if she doesn't cooperate? Then she will be included in the charges as a co-conspirator. We're talking 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I hung up the phone and looked at Laura. The choice is hers. She can continue to protect Jennifer and face criminal charges, or she can finally tell the truth and begin to right the wrongs she helped cause. Laura closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had loved years ago. What do I need to do to cooperate? As we walked back to the car, I realized I felt no anger or vindictive satisfaction. Just a deep sadness for what we had lost and a strange peace knowing that finally, the truth was prevailing. The pathetic trophy husband had done more than avenge a personal humiliation. He had dismantled a criminal empire and possibly saved thousands of lives. But the price of this victory would be the complete destruction of what remained of our marriage. 3 months later, Jennifer Walsh was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for securities fraud, conspiracy, and antitrust violations. The judge described her crimes as a systematic betrayal of public trust that resulted in immeasurable human suffering. During the sentencing, Jennifer maintained her composure until the moment the prosecutor mentioned that the technical evidence that led to her conviction was provided by a special consultant whose meticulous work saved thousands of lives. That's when she saw me in the courtroom gallery. Our eyes met for a second. In that moment, she finally understood that the pathetic trophy husband had orchestrated her complete destruction using the very skill she had chosen to despise. Laura cooperated fully with authorities, providing details about internal operations that helped build cases against other executives involved. Her cooperation earned her criminal immunity, but it didn't protect her from professional consequences. No reputable pharmaceutical company would hire her after her association with the Whitmore scandal. She spent the next few months working as a freelance consultant, earning a fraction of what she used to make. "Dan, I know I have no right to ask this," she said on a rainy October afternoon, sitting in our living room for the last time. "But can you forgive me?" "Laura, forgiveness implies that you did something wrong to me personally. What you did was choose to support a criminal instead of listening to your husband. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences. What about us? Is there any chance we can rebuild?" I thought about the question as I watched the rain beat against the window. The woman who fell in love with me in the library believed in equal partnership. The woman who laughed at my humiliation at the gala believed in hierarchies based on corporate status. I can't rebuild a relationship with someone who has fundamentally changed his values. 2 days later, Laura signed the divorce papers without contest. The Whitmore Corporation investigation resulted in sweeping reforms in the pharmaceutical industry. New regulations were implemented to prevent price manipulation, and a restitution fund was established to compensate families harmed by Jennifer's schemes. I received job offers from every major consulting firm in the country. My reputation as the analyst who dismantled the biggest pharmaceutical fraud scheme of the decade opened doors I never imagined possible. But the most significant transformation wasn't professional. For years, I had defined myself through my relationship with Laura, adapting my personality and ambitions to support her dreams. Now, for the first time since college, I was living entirely for myself. Marcus Rivera invited me to co-write a book about the investigation. Body and Soul: How an Underestimated Husband Brought Down a Pharmaceutical Empire became a bestseller and was adapted into a Netflix documentary. The most ironic thing is that I achieved more professional recognition in the 6 months after my divorce than I did in 8 years of marriage. During the documentary's premiere in New York, a journalist asked me if I felt vindicated seeing Jennifer in prison. Satisfaction comes from knowing that families no longer have to choose between essential medications and other basic needs because of her schemes. Jennifer was just the symbol of a corrupt system. Destroying the symbol without reforming the system would be empty revenge. And his ex-wife? Do you have any regrets about how it all ended? Laura made choices based on values I couldn't respect. I made choices based on principles I couldn't compromise. Sometimes two good people simply discover they're incompatible when tested by real pressure. If you believe that all underappreciated talent deserves recognition and that the truth always prevails, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of people who turned humiliation into triumph. Today, I run my own consulting firm specializing in corporate ethics. I work exclusively with organizations committed to making a positive difference in the world. On the wall of my new office, I have a framed photo, Whitmore's Gala place card with the words "Pathetic Trophy Husband Who is Good for Nothing." Just below it is a gold plaque that reads, "Financial Analyst of the Year, National Association of Corporate Auditors." Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply proving those who tried to diminish you completely wrong about who you really are.